All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start.
Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today we're going to do something a little bit different where I'm going to be breaking down the sessions, the mixing sessions for my track that was recently released. It's called Off the Wall.
Too bad you just try to come around when you heard the song, yeah. You ought to know, surround myself with realness.
A lot of you are just asking about, what are the specific effects I was using on my vocals? What are some of the details of the instrumental mix session? As you may know, I've talked about this before. My workflow is a little bit different. With my own stuff, I will tend to do the production and the mix of the beat separately. And then I have a session where I track vocals, I mix vocals, and just kind of put everything together. I'll do some mastering in that session. The idea for this video is just to give you a different perspective. Most of the videos on YouTube for me are kind of pieces of my mixing process or focusing on a specific approach or plugin versus, showing the whole session and kind of giving you a broader perspective of what's happening in there. So hopefully some things that you'll be able to take away from this. But let's go ahead and dive in. Let's open up the beat mixing session first. And I'm going to talk about, some of the production choices, the instrumentation, as well as some of the mixing methods that I used here. All right, y'all. So this is the beat and production session here. Again, all of the composition and then also the mixing of the various instrumental things were done all in this session. So let me just go ahead and play this back, a little bit of it. So let me let my 808 ring out. Let's go ahead and talk about really the biggest aspect of this track was the low end and the bass. It's intentionally very massive. Funny thing about this is we don't have a ton to talk about in terms of the mixing. You'll see these are at 0. There's no effects on my 808 tracks. These are just presets from my 808 packs. So I didn't do anything to them, didn't touch them. Obviously, there's effects processing and different modulations done within the presets themselves. But otherwise, it was just a matter of, just sequencing them out. I mean, they sound... So they're pretty heavy. So let's talk a little bit about the synths and the melodic aspects. The melodic stuff was not really heavy. I wanted the focus to be the low end and the vocal and the drums really, but there's different aspects, just little kind of sprinkles of melodies in here. And I used a lot of arcade, which if you're not familiar, it's a really cool loop instrument. And so I took some of these phrases and I just chopped them up. They have these different modifier keys. So it's like hitting the modifiers will do things with the pitch. It'll chop things up and give you different timing. As far as mixing wise, it was really just leveling. And then they have some cool controls in here that you can do directly from the interface, reverb, delay. I had this pretty dry. It was just kind of like a percussion element. And then I just did some automation rides. We've got, I think I did like an EQ ride, on this little synth that gets introduced here. So moving on, we got some of these big kick hits, and I've got some cool like tape delays and things like that. And the low end's EQ'd off of this stuff because, I already have this huge 808. So a lot of your sessions, you've got a heavy 808, maybe a kick playing underneath it. If you have any percussion elements or even any instruments, you'll notice on this horn stab, the big epic, movie horn stab kind of sample, I rolled off low end off of that because you'll notice, let's just say I took that kick and then also the horn and we left that low end. Listen to this. All right, now I'll EQ them. Should be on speakers or some headphones, but hopefully you noticed how muddy that got, and it distorted a little bit as well when I didn't have that stuff rolled off. So you want to be really aware of what is going on in the low end, what instruments have things that are clashing with your bass line and your kick, and get rid of them, because we want to hear certain aspects of these sounds, but we don't need a bunch of low end stacked up. So you can see I had a little like reverse kick and I EQ'd the low end off of that as well. And really just trying to keep my low end as clean as possible so that 808 could just rock. Otherwise, the snare just has a little reverb on it, nothing crazy, kind of a short space there. A lot of it was just choosing the right sounds and then piecing them together. And then obviously there's a lot of automation in this session. So just bringing things in and out and creating movement with it. But you'll see, even some of these faders are just at 0. And a lot of that is the way that I process these samples. And I use a plugin called Nerve. And so I may have done some effects and things in Nerve, and then I just drag it out of Nerve into audio. So I'm committing to it at that point. That's why a lot of my production sessions you'll see are in Wave. They're not necessarily in MIDI at that point, because I like to just drag out of a sequencer like Nerve and start rocking with the writing process. But let's talk now about just the stereo bus. This is something that was a little bit different. There is a EQP1A. This is the Puig Tech based on the Pultec from Waves. Nothing is boosted, attenuated. I don't have anything on here changed. However, the EQP1A, when it's just on, it adds some color and it actually will give you a bit of saturation that is very pleasant. So a lot of times I'll just put this on the bus just to give me some of that. Let's play the verse back without it, and then I'll just play it so you can see if you can hear the difference. So you'll notice we got a little bit of saturation, a little bit of a silky kind of top in there. Very subtle, but again, just putting that on there. And then I have this really small boost. I'm not exactly sure why I did this. It's like a half dB at 1200 at the time. Go into the IM Pusher. Again, this is a plugin that can just really help create more of a vibe and a sound for your beats. And as long as you're careful with it, you don't want to get carried away. But I just did a little bit of high-end boosting, some stereo image stuff, and some of the magic control, which is just sort of a saturation. And then we've got this low processing that adds some harmonics to the low end. And then I'm just getting this thing to commercial levels and then just sticking it right below 0. Now, a lot of you are going to ask, well, why would you do the limiting and quote mastering for the beat in this process? And the reason is because I knew that I was going to be just working with the 2-track for this beat, which is what I do with a lot of my stuff, because it just gets too convoluted. If I was to try to do my vocals and all the processing and everything else in this session, it would just be a big mess. So I like to get the instrumental where it needs to be, all the levels, all the kind of finalizing of the beat done. And then I import it into the new session, which we're going to see in just a second, which is where all the vocals are done. So I'm kind of doing a lot of the mastering, at least on the instrumental side here. And then we're just kind of touching things up in the vocal session if needed. But you're going to see I did very little mastering on that because I had already done this with the music itself. So let's go ahead and get into the vocal session, which is quite a bit more involving in terms of mixing. All right, so this is the vocal tracking session and the mixing session. This is where all of it was finalized. As you can see, I just dragged in the 2-track, and we'll jump into the vocal mix, which is quite a bit more involving than the beat mix.
I had this faith deep down, and man, I knew it all along. Too bad you just tried to come around when you heard this song, yeah. You ought to know, surround myself with realness. I can smell the phony, lunch meat bologna. Life can be so serious sometimes. This one I wanted to lighten up my rhymes. You ain't gotta overthink it, take a deep breath and vibe with me. My flow is off the wall, yeah, yeah. You hear me when I call, yeah. They follow, we lead them all, yeah, yeah. Don't doubt what I said that I ball, yeah, yeah. Foot in the door and I'm fitting to get it now.
All right, so where do we start here? Let's go into just the vocals as a whole. And as you could see, Waves Tune Real Time was a big part of the vocals with this. And so the settings for this, you'll see it's a pretty fast speed, kind of a robotic sound. I've got it set to baritone and 100% correction. Pretty basic stuff. And then they're just kind of copied directly as inserts across the vocals. So let's just play back the first verse here.
You flow, y'all trip off some triplets, and I get this. It was a freestyle, I went back and ripped it. I swear this was purely off the top, but I speak from my heart. And
so pretty crisp vocal tone, but also very thick in that we've got 2 or 3 different layers. If you're not familiar with this method of tracking, I've shown it in a video. I'll put a link to it. But basically what I did was I just tracked this verse 3 times and just stacked it. And then I have 2 of the stacks up underneath it, and then they're run to the same bus. So let's go to the part that you all are probably most interested in, which is the vocal chain for the verse. I had a lot of questions on the video where I showed the freestyle for this when I was writing it. And a lot of you were curious about what the reverb and the delay were. So let's go down here and we're going to see, this is a pretty straightforward vocal chain. I have the Pro Q2. I'm cutting off quite a bit of, well, really all the lows below about 100. And then we've got some pretty serious dipping around 200 and 500. And then we've got the Pro C. For whatever reason, I just prefer the Pro C to the Pro C2, the newer version. I don't know why. When I first pull this up, the sound to me is just better. I just like it. Or maybe I'm just used to the interface. But we've got a 3-to-1 ratio. Not a ton of compression. The reason being that I compressed a little bit on the way in while I was tracking with the Aphex channel. I've got a video on that as well. I'll put up if you want to see the process. So not too crazy with the compression once I've already done some in tracking. Then we're doing the Puig Tech, and we've got a very, very aggressive boost here at 12K. And then we're feeding that directly into the Waves de-esser. You've seen me do that 1,000 times, but let's get to the interesting part, which is going to be the reverb, which is Pro R. And I have been just putting this on pretty much anything and everything since I got it. It's a great reverb, very versatile, and it just has a musical tone to it. And it's quick to dial in a good setting with Pro R. A lot of reverbs out here, they give you a lot of different controls, but it can just be kind of, just convoluted and overly complicated in terms of dialing in something quickly for a vocal or for instrumentation. And so I really like this plugin. So I used that, and then I just EQ'd the lows, some highs, a little bit of the mids. And then we have a send going to the delay, this is a little bit more involving because we've got one delay that is the Echo Boy. So let me solo this again so y'all can hear it.
you flow, y'all trip off some triplets, and I get this. It was a freestyle, I went back and ripped it.
So I just edited this studio tape style. It's a quarter note delay. We've got a lot of low cut and high cut, and then we've got some diffusion happening, which makes this very interesting. Let me turn that off so you can hear the difference. I love this diffusion effect in Echo Boy.
Purely off the top, but I speak from my heart, and we did it since the start. Every day I'm in here working hard, trying to bring some value to your home, teach them something.
So it just gives you some spatial effect there, some stereo effect that's really interesting. And then we've got this big throw, and this thing is quite involving. So we've got the H delay from waves. Where is that happening? Let me see. Okay, so yeah, we've got a throw. Happens throughout the track, but here's a pretty major one here.
That they might not have known. I'm sitting here drinking gin.
So let's solo that if we can.
They might not have known. Real man.
Pretty trippy, right? You got kind of a crazy chorusing effect. So again, it's just a delay throw, typical delay throw with a half note here in H delay, but then I'm processing this delay signal with a couple of cool things. Number one, Valhalla space modulator, and we've got a flange type of effect there. And then that is then going into the vintage verb to give us a big reverb space. So just wanted to use that throughout the track. We use it over here as well.
For so long, for so wrong.
So you'll notice that when I went over here to these throws, some different effects lit up. So those are actually automated. So what I did was over here, I didn't want this doubler effect on the echo, but in the third verse, I wanted to have this octaved double turn on. So you could hear in the background, there's a little, there's like an octave down on the doubler.
For so long, for so wrong.
So again, just automating that to turn on only in the third verse, you'll see. And I even changed the timing of this throughout some of it. This space echo is just, it's really, there's a lot going on. But let's see. Yeah, so the doubler, you can see it's bypassed. And then once we hit the third verse, it turns on. That's a cool technique just to keep things interesting and keep movement going throughout your mix. We talk a lot about techniques to create a more dynamic arrangement. So there you go. There's a key example with that echo. So then moving on to the hook vocals, let's take a listen. Let's just solo those real quick. And we'll go over here where my main harmonies are.
My flow is off the wall. Yeah, yeah. You hear me when I call. Yeah, yeah. They follow, we lead them all. Yeah, yeah. Don't doubt when I said that I ball. Yeah, yeah. Foot in the door and I'm fitting to get it now.
All right, so I think the main hook layer it's the same chain. So you see here on hook A, did the same thing. However, the hook B, which is the yeah, there's quite a bit different chain here. So we've got a filter effect. Let me just solo those.
My flow is off the wall. Yeah, yeah. You hear me when I call. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So for that, it's just an auto filter, and then I'm using the LFO to modulate this cutoff and resonance, and it just gives it sort of this robotic sort of feel to it. And then we're going into, I think, the same processing in terms of the EQ, but we do have a different reverb, which is the seventh heaven. I'm using the large and near algorithm, and then we're EQing that just a slightly bit different. And again, that just gives you a whole different tone so that we're differentiating these hook parts. And it just makes the yeah less monotonous. And I thought it was just more interesting to process that differently versus if I just fed it into the same processing as, the other hook parts. I just don't think it would have provided that separation and interest for the hook. So let's talk about this little track here called Crazy Reverb. This is something that I did just specifically in the third verse. So let's go over here, and I think it's on this ad lib. maybe. Let's see.
When you heard this song, yeah, you ought to know. Surround myself with realness.
Okay, so yeah, it's just the phrase, you ought to know.
You ought to know.
You got that, right?
You ought to know. I can smell the phony.
There is a bit crusher. Then that is going into a big reverb. And then I've created a modulation with this plugin from Cable Guys. It's called Filter Shaper 3. And this is just giving us a tremolo effect. So don't know if a listener is going to necessarily pick up on exactly what's going on there. But in the track, it definitely gives you a cool vibe.
You ought to know. Surround myself with realness. I can smell the phony. Lunch meat bologna. Life can be so serious sometimes. This one I wanted to lighten up my rhymes. You ain't gotta overthink it. Take a deep breath and vibe with me. My flow is off the wall. Yeah, yeah. You hear me when I call.
You can obviously see that I'm using a lot of aux tracks. Pretty much everything is run to its own aux. I like to process sessions this way. It's just a better organization, and it just helps give you a more cohesive sound across the board. But then otherwise, pitch correction is being done as inserts directly on the track. We got a lot of panning. I wanted really wide, exciting vocals, and then just blending and meshing things together. There's quite a bit of just balancing that happened. Let's take a really quick look at the master. Like I was telling you about in the beat session, I did not do a whole lot, so I didn't rely on the master very much at all for this track. So let's just see what we got here. Yeah, very exciting stuff. We have a maximizer with just a 0.5 dB pulling down on threshold, and then we've just got true peak turned on to keep us below 0. So there's that, and then there is an imager that is narrowing the low end just slightly, again, because I wanted our bass and our low end to just be thunderous, and I want to keep things mono down there below 80. And then we've got just a little bit of widening at band 4 going up above 5K. But you could see, we did so much panning in terms of the vocals, and then with the IM pusher processing that we did on the beat mix in the beat session with the width. Obviously, this is a lot different than when I'm sent a session to master from a client, because I'm not involved in every process like this. So I'm not kind of getting things exactly where they need to be before the master. So there's more work to be done at that point in that scenario. But again, when I am approaching it as a mix engineer, I'm listening to things. Even when it comes to creating the beat, I'm doing sound design things that are mix focused, and everything involved is keeping the mix at the forefront. I hope by showing you both of these sessions, you picked up some things, maybe a cool plugin here or there, or maybe just a method of some of the automation things that we did in this session are a little different. Obviously, using auxes and things, especially with a vocal session that's this big. This is not the biggest in the world, but with all the different things going on, we want to keep things organized and just know exactly where to reach for various tracks. So hope this helps y'all. If you have any questions, obviously I wasn't able to cover everything, but if there's something that I didn't touch on that you're curious about, feel free to leave a comment below. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. We'll talk to you soon.
You hear me when I call, yeah, yeah. They follow, we live.